Hilton, Fox News contributor. And we should mention, by the way, the bottom right of your screen, you see the president. He is now speaking in Anchorage, Alaska. And, of course, Steve, he was justly, I think, criticized big time for not being in one of the attack sites of 9/11. First president since 9/11 not to be there. He was going to Alaska, presumably originally to talk about his green energy plans and taking off some of the land that will be available for drilling. But because of the pushback, he's now primarily talking about 9/11. That's what we're hearing. But earlier, we have to point out that one of the reasons his numbers are falling so disastrously is because of things like what we heard in Hanoi when he spoke to the press. Let me just play a clip of that and get your reaction. Roll tape.
Well, there's a lot of lying dog-faced pony soldiers out there about global warming. Staffers, or anybody haven't spoken to... No, I ain't calling on you. I'm calling on... I said I had 5 questions. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed. It wasn't confrontational at all. You came up with me.
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve, are performances like that the reason his staff didn't want him to speak at a 9/11 event?
What must the world think? What must they think when they see that? I mean, it's one thing when we're used to it here in a way now, but sadly, over the years he's been in the White House, he's doing these events and he sort of wanders off and shakes hands with imaginary people and whatever. In a way, we've gotten used to it. But when he does it on the world stage like that, that's not just an embarrassment for him and his party. It's an embarrassment for our country, and particularly on this day, when the world is thinking about America and we're all thinking about what America means. That's who's representing us. That's how he's doing it. It is absolutely appalling.
Well, and the question comes about, will those performances that we've seen be stronger in influence in the 2024 election than people's presumed fear of Donald Trump being the president?
There's 2 things going on. There's the complete absence of leadership, this vacuum in the White House, clearly there. This person who's just clearly not in any capacity a leader of any kind. But then on top of that, you've got the results. So you have Democrats scratching their heads and saying, well, how come his poll numbers are so bad? He's passed all this legislation. That's what they all say, as if passing legislation is a goal in itself and actually means anything to anyone. No, it's the results of the policies that matter. And on issue after issue, the results have been terrible, not just the performance. The results. Look at the economic news, which you covered the whole time. I mean, we've had real earnings falling for a longer period than in recent memory, and they're still underwater. And then you've got the crime situation, you've got the border crisis, you've got energy, gas prices going up again, everything. I mean, what have they done?
And the one thing that links all of those situations together is a phrase you used, the vacuum of leadership.
Yes.
If the United States is too big, too important, too much of an integral part of the entire world to have a vacuum of leadership at the top. If you do, there's disaster, not only internally, but externally as well.
Exactly, and everyone can feel that. That's why there's such a level of concern in the Democratic Party. But the problem is there's nothing they can do about it. They're paralyzed because he won't budge. In the end, it's very difficult to make him give up and say, sorry, I'm not running again. He is an incredibly vain and narcissistic individual. He, Biden, has been plotting and scheming to get this job for over 50 years. That's all he's ever wanted to do. Not because he wants to achieve anything, he just wants to be president. He told that to the parents of his first wife on the first date, practically. It's in a biography of him. So the idea that he's just going to give it up voluntarily, it's not going to happen. So they're stuck with him.
Let's talk pure politics for a second here, because you have 2 big parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, but they are not as big singly as that 40% of independent voters in the country, many of whom do have reluctance to vote for Donald Trump because they might like his policies, but they don't particularly like him. Will that reluctance be overcome by what they are seeing in that vacuum of leadership?
I think that it really will, because you've got a combination of that vacuum and people thinking, well, it wasn't that long ago that Trump was president. And they remember what it was like. They remember the jobs. They remember the total reorientation of policy on China, on energy, on the border. and they felt better about things. All the polling shows that. They even felt better, despite all the lectures from the media and everyone else about how Donald Trump destroyed democracy. Even when people are asked in these polls, how is the institution of the presidency, they feel is weaker now.
But they see it
Trump.
in their personal lives. You talk about the destruction of democracy that Trump is accused of being a part of. What about the destruction of our inalienable rights?
Exactly.
What about the destruction that we saw of our rights during the pandemic? What about just recently the New Mexican governor talking about getting rid of, in a temporary form because of emergencies, getting rid of the First and the Second Amendment? People don't want to lose their rights. They don't want rights to become privileges which can be taken away by leaders. And the rights are unalienable, and they're not supposed to be taken away.
And I think this is the central point, because perhaps the reluctant Trump voter is someone, obviously he's got his fans and the base are going to vote for him, but the reluctant Trump voter might well be someone who looks around and says, actually, so many things in our society, in our country, are under threat from the far left. Those things you listed, look at what's going on in schools, the onward march of the extremism you see, the cultural extremism from the far left, and they're thinking, we've got to have someone to stand up to this. Biden's not standing up to it, he's giving into it. He's completely controlled by the activists of the far left, and so they're looking around and thinking at least Donald Trump is someone with the strength to stand up to this destruction of all the things that we really care about in our society.
And on local levels, whether it's dealing with a governor of New Mexico or school boards or whatever it is, you do see this pushback, and I feel like it's growing. I don't think it's peaked. I think it continues to grow. By the way, you even saw gun control advocates who were against the New Mexico governor because of her going against the Constitution.
Exactly. And so I think that people are realizing that the far left have had it their own way for too long, and you're seeing people rise up. You're seeing it in California, where I live. You're seeing it across the country. People are saying, no, you're going too fast and too far to the left, and we've had enough of it, and enough is enough. That, I think, is the mood going into this election.
Could we see California go Republican?
One day, I'm here to tell you, well, I'm working very hard to make it happen.
Steve Hilton, good to see you.